Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. The Chinese military has completed 96 years today. They haven't been tested in a war in decades. They're the world's biggest military, but they're not in the news for any of their achievements or celebrations today. Two of their top generals went missing some time back, and now they've been sacked. They belong to an elite rocket force led by Xi Jinping himself, and their story sounds eerily similar to that of China's former foreign minister. First missing, then fired. This is a pattern now. Top officials are disappearing. There's talk of a purge. We'll tell you all about it in the show tonight. Also tracking the events in Ukraine and Russia, more drone attacks on Moscow. Poland and Lithuania are looking to seal their borders. Meanwhile, India is wondering if Vladimir Putin will attend the G20 summit next month. Will he come to India? We'll share what we know. In Pakistan, the stage is being set for Nawaz Sharif's return, and in Israel, a new law on sexual terrorism, that's what they're calling it. This new law is being called racist. Also, the trend of taking diabetes drugs for weight loss. Is it safe? And why is it being allowed? We'll discuss all of that. The headlines first. Niger remains volatile after the coup last week. European countries rush to evacuate their citizens. France will begin evacuations today amid rising tensions with Niger. Italy is arranging a special flight to repatriate its nationals. US officials meet Taliban leaders in Qatar, the first such meeting since they took power in Kabul 2 years ago. The two sides discussed lifting of sanctions and travel bans. The Taliban also sought the release of the assets of the Afghan Central Bank held abroad. In India, at least 5 people, including policemen, are dead in communal clashes near the capital. Mobs hurled stones at a Hindu religious procession in a predominantly Muslim district in Haryana. Mobile internet services have been suspended in a few places. More than 80 people have been arrested. Vegan raw food influencer reportedly dies of starvation. Zana Samsonova was from Moscow but was staying in Sri Lanka. She lived on a raw vegan diet which included eating unprocessed food cooked below a certain temperature. And the UK launches its first postal deliveries by drone. Mail on the Scottish Isles of Orkney will be delivered by drone starting today. The world's first drone delivery service was launched in Iceland in 2017. It is the season of layoffs, not just in the corporate world, but also in the Communist Party of China. Xi Jinping is shaking up the Chinese government and its institutions. Qin Gang was the first one to go. He was China's foreign minister. First he went missing, then he was fired. There is still no sign of him and no explanation on what happened to him. Many say he was axed because of an affair. Others say it was a political purge. Whatever the case, that purge has continued into this week. More pink slips have been handed out in China. The target this time is the military. 2 generals have been booted out. They led China's nuclear rocket force. Now this is an elite unit. It manages China's nuclear arsenal. Let's tell you about the generals who were fired. General Li Yuchao and his deputy, General Liu Guangbin. Fun fact, they're also missing. Just like the former foreign minister, these 2 generals have also gone missing. It's not clear when they disappeared, but some observers say they've been out of action for months now. And there are more people on this missing list, 10 former and current officials. They too were part of the rocket force. Their whereabouts are not known. Yesterday, we got some pictures from Beijing. Xi Jinping attended a ceremony and he promoted 2 officials. They will now lead this rocket force, Wang Hubin and Xu Zisheng. Xi Jinping gave them their promotion certificates. That's what they call them in China.
这次晋升上将军衔的军官是火箭军司令员王厚斌。
And this is not a normal shake-up. This is the largest purge at the highest levels of the PLA in a decade. Why is this happening? At this point, your guess is as good as mine. As always, Chinese officials are silent. And in the absence of an official explanation, rumors are swirling. Some say these generals face corruption charges and that they're being investigated. Others say there's been an intelligence leak and that military secrets have been compromised in China. We cannot confirm either version. It might take weeks or months for the real story to come out. At this point, we cannot even say if there is a link between the departure of Qing Gang and these generals. But we can tell you that there are clear signs of mistrust. Even after more than 12 years in power, Xi Jinping still has some major trust issues, especially with the military leadership. He demands, quote-unquote, absolute loyalty from them. This month, the president chaired 2 high-level meetings. He met top military leaders and he gave them some clear instructions. We have a copy of that statement. Listen to what Xi Jinping said. Military leaders must focus on solving the prominent problems that persist at party organizations on all levels with regard to enforcing the party's absolute leadership over the military. That last bit says everything. Enforce the party's absolute leadership over the military. That's what Xi Jinping wants. He wants the party to run the military and he wants the generals to pledge their loyalties, which, by the way, is not a new mandate. Xi Jinping became president of China in 2012 and since then, he's been trying to enforce the party's will and by extension, he's been trying to accumulate more power. That mission was extended to the PLA as well. Under Xi Jinping, a new structure was created for the Chinese military. It led to the birth of the Rocket Force in 2015. Now, this rocket force is a very important branch. Like I said, it handles China's nuclear arsenal. It also manages missile systems, the kind that can be used to attack Taiwan or deter American movement in sensitive areas like the South China Sea. So a shake-up in this department is quite significant. And here's something else you should know. Since taking over, Xi Jinping has sacked thousands of military officials. He has investigated hundreds for graft. And in the process, he has created a structure that gives him complete control. Xi Jinping is the chairman of the Central Military Commission, or CMC, Central Military Commission. This is the top military decision-making body in China. The chairmanship of this body gives Xi Jinping immense power. He is the supreme commander of the PLA. All the wings of the PLA, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, all of them report to him. So does the Rocket Force. Over the past decade, Xi Jinping has promoted his favorite generals. He surrounded himself with loyalists and installed watchdogs inside the CMC, just to avoid what's happening right now. Now, those same reforms are failing him. So the question is the Chinese president's bid to consolidate power backfiring? Has the Chinese military been compromised? Can the president not trust his own generals anymore? These are uncomfortable questions. And for a country like China, which has picked a fight with practically everyone, these are also dangerous questions. And the timing could not have been worse. Today is the PLA's 96th anniversary. But instead of celebration, they're in the news for a purge. The facade of authority around their president is under stress. Moscow is under attack. It may not be raining rockets or missiles, but the city is firmly on Ukraine's radar. Several drones flew into Moscow's airspace on Tuesday. All of them were shot down. One of these objects crashed into an office building. It's the same one which was struck on Sunday as well. So that's 3 days and 2 attacks. What exactly is Ukraine playing at? And how will Russia respond? Well, Ukraine's neighbors are bracing for a spillover, especially Poland and Lithuania. Both are NATO members. They're now thinking about shutting their borders with Belarus. Why Belarus? Because that's where the Wagner fighters are based. Lithuania and Belarus share a 670-kilometer long border. Poland and Belarus, around 400 kilometers. Both these borders are fenced, but occasionally migrants and refugees do turn up. That's what both Poland and Lithuania are scared of, that Wagner fighters will pose as refugees to enter their countries.
Most likely, they will be disguised as the Belarusian border guard and help illegal migrants get to the Polish territory and destabilize Poland. Presumably, they will also try to infiltrate Poland, pretending to be illegal migrants, and they will try to enter Poland, and this poses additional threats.
Will Putin risk that? Well, technically, he won't be involved. Wagner fighters recently staged a mutiny against Vladimir Putin. Western governments declared it a big defeat for him. US President Joe Biden said Putin was weakened. So if Wagner attacks Poland or Lithuania, can the West still call it a Russian attack? Because on paper, Wagner is not Russia. They're anti-Putin, remember? This is what Lithuania and Poland are scared of, that Putin will wage a proxy war against them. He can attack NATO territory, yet deny any official involvement. We've heard these theories before. Most of them have amounted to nothing. So we'll have to wait and see how this one pans out. In the meantime, let's look at the front lines. Russia's army chief visited a command center in the Zaporizhia region. It's a focal point of Ukraine's counteroffensive. Some of the fiercest fights are happening here. Now, the Russian army chief isn't exactly a popular man right now. The Wagner chief had some colorful things to say about him. So did most of Russia's ultra-nationalist bloggers. They blame the general for Russia's slow progress. This visit is supposed to calm the nerves. Maybe the people of Moscow need it too. Their city was supposed to be safe from the war, but that has changed in the last few weeks. On Sunday and Tuesday, Moscow's business districts were under attack. The same high-rise was hit twice. Now imagine you're an ordinary office goer in the city. Would you be worried? Looking at these pictures, I guess you would be. And that's what Ukraine is counting on. The fear factor to build pressure on Russian citizens. The Kremlin has a different take, though. They say Ukraine's counteroffensive has failed, so this is desperation. Listen to this.
Amid the failure of the so-called counteroffensive, the Kyiv regime, backed by its Western sponsors, has focused on carrying out terrorist attacks on civilian infrastructure.
Now, don't think this is one-way traffic. Most of Ukraine's drones are being shot down, but the Russian ones are hitting bullseye, and this is the result. On Monday, Russia struck civilian targets in Zelensky's hometown. At least 4 people were killed. One of them was a 10-year-old girl. Another drone strike hit the city of Kharkiv. It is the second biggest city in Ukraine. 2 floors of a college dormitory were destroyed. Now, these are all civilian targets. The high-rise in Moscow, the apartments in Zelensky's hometown, the dormitory in Kharkiv, these are not legitimate military targets. Why then are they being bombed? Because both sides are more desperate. And Russia is clearly doing more of the damage. Just look at these numbers. Around 150,000 residential buildings attacked, 150,000, 150 bridges, 900 cultural centers, and 3,000 shops and malls. That's Russia's track record in the last 500 days. But when Ukraine hits Moscow, they call it a terrorist attack. A bit rich, I would say. But the larger point is this: neither side should be striking civilian targets. If you're desperate, sue for peace. Don't kill civilians. Which brings us to the talks in Saudi Arabia. The kingdom is planning a peace summit later this month. Ukraine is attending, but not Russia. The United States has confirmed its participation. A dozen others, including India, will also be attending. But is there appetite for peace? Putin says he's always open to talks.
We can't stop the fire when they attack us. When I say this, people start thinking, start the peace talks. We never rejected them. You know, I'm always saying we never rejected the peace talks.
Let's face it, these are not genuine statements. Putin is not serious about a peace deal. Neither is Zelensky serious about concessions, which is why this war is dragging on endlessly. When the fighting broke out, we used to track casualties every day, see how many people were killed, how many missiles were used. But 500 days on, no one is keeping track, it seems. The violence has been largely considered normal and inevitable. Unless that changes, there won't be peace. From the battlefield, let's turn to the diplomacy, to a question rather. Will Vladimir Putin come to India for the G20 summit? The summit is next month on September 9th and 10th. So far, there is no confirmation about Putin's attendance. He was asked about it recently, and this was his reply. I don't know yet. I haven't thought about it. We'll have to see. So pretty non-committal. If Putin does come, expect some fireworks. He would be face-to-face with all Western leaders: Joe Biden, Rishi Sunak, Emmanuel Macron, Olaf Scholz, all of them. Not a single Western leader has met Putin after he invaded Ukraine. But at the G20, they may have to share the stage. So I come back to my question. Will Putin come? Let's look at India's position first. As host, we have to invite all the G20 members. So Putin does have an official invite from New Delhi. But is that a genuine invite? Or is it just courtesy? Here's what the Indian government said.
I don't have yet any information to share about any physical visits. We would, I think, hope to see President Putin at the G20 Leaders Summit in September, but whether there's a separate visit or not, I don't have anything particular to share.
The Russian president has visited 8 countries since the invasion. Let's pull up the map for you. He's visited all 5 Central Asian countries, or the 5 stans as they're called. He's also visited Iran, Belarus and Armenia. Now, what's common about these countries? They're either close partners of Russia, like Belarus, or they absolutely hate the West, like Iran. But India does not fit perfectly in either group. It does have close relations with Russia, but it also shares close relations with the West. So it's a tough call to make. I'm sure a lot of debate is happening behind the scenes. Let's not speculate on that. Instead, let's look at the known variables. We know 3 things for sure. Number 1, this is the second G20 summit after the war broke out. The 2022 meeting was hosted by Indonesia. Putin did not attend that summit. He skipped it. Number 2, he will also skip the BRICS summit in South Africa. Putin will attend this event virtually. There was a big controversy around whether he would be arrested. You see, the ICC has issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin. This is the International Criminal Court, the ICC. South Africa has ratified the ICC charter. So technically, South Africa will have to arrest Putin if he lands on their soil. Their government, though, rejected all of this. Nonetheless, Putin chose to stay away. And finally, number 3, the arrest warrant is not a problem for India. We have not signed the ICC charter, so an arrest is not even a technical possibility. Does that mean Putin will turn up? I'm afraid it's not as simple as that. If it were, the trip would have been announced. Putin is visiting Turkey this month. That trip has already been announced by Moscow. He's also visiting China in the month of October. That too has been confirmed. It's only the New Delhi visit that is yet to be announced. What does that tell you? The issue is not scheduling or dates. The issue is political, and a lot depends on India's concerns. How will the West react if Putin turns up? Will they boycott the summit? Will they allow a joint statement? Will they even allow a civil discussion? And let's face it, a summit with Putin will be vastly different from one without him. Forget issues of the global south, forget hunger, forget climate change. Chances are just one issue will be discussed then, and that issue is Ukraine. And if that happens, India's job becomes even more difficult. Why is that? Because we are hosting the summit. It is India's job to draft a joint statement that all members will agree to. Indonesia managed to do that last year, but India has had less success. In March this year, the G20 foreign ministers met. No joint statement came out. In July, the G20 finance ministers met. Again, no joint statement. If the same happens in September, it would be a major embarrassment. India has pitched itself as a bridging power. So if India can't bridge differences, who can? I'm sure Vladimir Putin knows all of this. If he turns up in New Delhi, the summit would be about one thing, and that's Putin himself. It also makes the chances of a consensus that much harder. So the president has a big choice to make, and so does India. New Delhi had a chance to host Putin last month. The SCO summit was happening. That's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It was supposed to be an in-person meeting, but India said, let's do a virtual one instead. Was this done to avoid hosting Putin? Well, with the SCO, it's hard to say. You also had Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Compared to them, I'm sure Putin was more welcome. Either way, the G20 summit promises to be a tough balancing act for New Delhi, possibly India's biggest yet. Abstaining at United Nations Security Council meetings is one thing. So is buying Russian oil or sending aid to Ukraine. But getting a consensus in New Delhi next month will be that much harder. India will need all the goodwill it has. Our next story is from Pakistan. Looks like Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is done warming his brother's chair. Shehbaz has made a big claim now. He says if his party wins the elections, Nawaz Sharif will be Prime Minister. Some background first. Nawaz Sharif is a 3-time Prime Minister. He is presently in London. In 2017, he was disqualified from being a lawmaker. He was given a lifetime ban. The next year, in 2019, he left for London. Officially, he has health problems, but unofficially, he just doesn't like jails. Nawaz Sharif was convicted in a corruption case. He was serving his 7-year sentence when the court granted him bail. He's never returned since. But now plans are being made. Nawaz Sharif is ready for his grand comeback. His younger brother Shehbaz has said that this is just a matter of weeks now. Talk about perfect timing. Pakistan's parliament will be dissolved on the 12th of August. After that, it's election season. And right on cue, the older Sharif is set to return. What do we make of this? Just one thing, really. Some sort of deal has been struck between the army and the Sharifs. The ruling coalition has probably been guaranteed victory. If not, Nawaz Sharif would never return. The risks are way too high for him. The Pakistan government has been preparing the ground for this. Last month, it introduced a new law, no lifetime bans on holding office. That was the law. Instead, just a 5-year disqualification. Again, how convenient is that? Nawaz Sharif was disqualified in 2017. Add 5 years and you get 2023. Either the Sharifs are really lucky or this is all rigged. I guess in Pakistan, it's all the same. The army manufactures your luck. Where does that leave Pakistan's democratic process? Where it always was. Nowhere. The government will officially step down on the 12th of August. The elections will take place in November. And the results, it's too easy to predict. The ruling coalition will likely return to power. The only question is who gets how many seats. Pakistan's ruling coalition has two big players, the PPP or the Pakistan People's Party. It is led by Bilawal Bhutto Zardari. The other one is the PMLN, the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz. N stands for Nawaz Sharif, so it's more of a family business. In fact, both parties are. Everyone knows how this election will end. But holding it is very important for the army, and I'll tell you why. The past couple of months have been tumultuous for the country. Ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan was on a rampage. His supporters even attacked the army headquarters. So the army had two choices, either ban and jail Imran Khan or beat him at his own game. Looks like the army has chosen plan B. Neither Imran Khan nor his party have been banned. They're free to contest the upcoming election. And when he loses, you can guess what the army will say. We told you so. All preparations have been made for this strategy. His party has been broken up. His top leaders have abandoned him. And his supporters are facing military trials. I guess it's true what they say. Never bet against the army in Pakistan. Having said that, the Nawaz Sharif decision is a bit surprising. His relationship with the army has always been problematic. In 2020, he gave a virtual address from London. He blasted the army leadership. He accused ex-army chief Qamar Javed Bajwa of toppling his government. So what has changed now? In 2 words, Imran Khan. You see, politicians in Pakistan are like packets in which your mobile phone comes. No one wants the packet. But you can't sell without them either. In Pakistan, these packets keep changing. In 2018, the army wanted to oust the Sharifs. So they used Imran Khan to control power. Now their goal is to keep Imran Khan out. So they're using the Sharifs to control power. It's like a rigged game of Monopoly. The army always wins. The people of Pakistan always lose. And now let's tell you about Myanmar, where the military seems to be losing ground. The Myanmar junta captured power in a coup in the year 2021. They pledged to hold elections by this year, but it looks like that's not happening anytime soon. The junta has extended the state of emergency. They say violence makes it impossible to hold elections. A significant portion of Myanmar is not under their control. There is rampant fighting, and an election at a time like this could mean fresh tensions, that's what they say. Meanwhile, Aung San Suu Kyi has been pardoned. She will now be moved to house arrest. So is the junta using Suu Kyi's pardon to distract from its own troubles? Is Myanmar's military losing the plot? Our next report brings you the full story.
Myanmar gained independence in 1958. But its post-independence history has never really been stable. There was unrest, conflicts, and an army that ruled for over 5 decades. The 2010s saw glimpses of democracy and peace. But then came the coup of 2021. Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy won the elections. They were about to take power. The NLD won nearly 80% of the seats, so a landslide victory for Suu Kyi. The army-backed proxy party won only 7% of the seats, so the military was alarmed. They feared that the party would change the constitution, basically weaken the military's political power, and make it answerable to elected governments. So the junta intervened. The coup plunged the Southeast Asian nation into chaos. There was widespread violence, arrests, killings as the junta launched a bloody crackdown on dissent. The coup was bloody, but the junta made one promise. They said they would hold elections by August 2023. Is that happening anytime soon? By the looks of it, no. The junta have extended Myanmar's state of emergency. They say it's because of the ongoing violence. On the other hand, they have issued a partial pardon for Aung San Suu Kyi. The 78-year-old faces 19 cases. Only 5 have been pardoned. So, a partial pardon. She's also being moved to house arrest. So basically, the junta has postponed elections, but they have also pardoned Aung San Suu Kyi. What explains this seemingly contradictory move? For many, it's just hogwash, a mere distraction from the junta's real troubles. The army may have captured power in 2021, but much of Myanmar is still out of their control. There is rising inflation, constant fighting, and in some areas, the resistance forces are reigning supreme. If an election happens anytime soon, the junta have no way to make sure it goes in their favor. So a delay is their only answer. Plus, there is the stumbling economy. Ever since the coup, it has been in a tailspin. There is hyperinflation and a lack of investments. As for the international community, many had pinned their hopes on the elections. That includes the ASEAN, which is a grouping of Southeast Asian nations. They looked at it as a pathway to peace. But with elections delayed, and with the junta doing just about anything to consolidate their power, it looks like the conflict will drag on. So stability remains a distant dream for Myanmar, at least for now.
And now let's talk about West Asia. These days, Joe Biden is paying close attention to the region. He has less than a year left in office. Biden desperately wants a foreign policy win, and he could be placing his bets on West Asia, specifically Israel and Saudi Arabia. Reports say the US is trying to broker a deal. US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has visited Riyadh twice in 3 months. And recently, the chief of Mossad was in Washington. Mossad, as you would know, is Israel's spy agency. Officially, there is no confirmation, but it appears that some back-channel talks are underway. And what is on the table? Normalization of ties. Israel and Saudi Arabia do not have a diplomatic relationship. I'm sure you know that. For the longest time, Riyadh has supported the Palestinian cause, so there was never a question of having a relationship with Israel. But in recent years, things have shifted. It began with Donald Trump, when Donald Trump was president, and Iran emerged as enemy number 1, both for Israel and for Saudi Arabia. And this brought them closer. They both want to contain Tehran, and this common enemy created openings for a relationship. Some Arab countries established ties with Israel. They signed what came to be called the Abraham Accords, and this could not have been done without Saudi Arabia's blessings. Then Riyadh allowed Israeli flights to cross Saudi airspace. So things were all going in the right direction, but Saudi Arabia has not yet taken the plunge. It has still not signed the Abraham Accords. Is that set to change? Well, there is a lot of buzz, a lot of diplomatic activity. American officials talking to the Saudis and Israelis. Reports say Riyadh has also made some demands. It wants some concessions for Palestinians. The Saudis have a wish list for America too. There are 2 major demands, basically. Riyadh wants American support for a civil nuclear program and a new security pact with Washington, D.C. The specifics of this agreement are yet to be spelled out, the specifics of these demands. But the nuclear program has been a long-standing demand of the Saudis. The kingdom wants to enrich its own uranium. Of course, Israel and the US have opposed this idea. They fear it will trigger a nuclear arms race. The opposition stems from mistrust. Israel fears the Saudis could overstep the mandate and a civilian program may open the doors for military use. This is the same old logic that is used to deter every country that wants nuclear power. But from Riyadh's perspective, this is non-negotiable. The nuclear deal is apparently a prerequisite for normalization. So this is where things stand. The question is, will Israel make these concessions on Palestine and on the nuclear deal? And will the US sign off on this? Like I said, they're still talking. But if Antony Blinken is to be believed, the Israelis and the Saudis are very keen on a deal. The US Secretary of State spoke about this in the month of June. He said, and I'm quoting, "It is incredibly challenging, hard, not something that can happen overnight, but it's also a real prospect and one that we're working on because both the Saudis and Israelis are looking for us to play a particular role in that effort. We are very much engaged in it." Blinken had visited the region in the month of June. He supported normalization. He said the US will not abandon the issue of Palestine at the same time.
Integration and normalization efforts are not a substitute for progress between Israelis and Palestinians, nor should they come at its expense. Israel's deepened relationships with its partners can and should advance the well-being of the Palestinian people and the prospects for a two-state solution.
So that's the American position. There can be normalization of ties, but not at the cost of Palestinians. It's a bit of a hard sell, but that's what they're going with. And Washington wants this deal as much as the Israelis and the Saudis. Not just for Biden's diplomatic win, which he very much wants, but also because this is their way of keeping Saudi Arabia close. Biden wanted to turn Riyadh into a pariah. He failed. He then tried to woo MBS, failed again. Now he's playing the Israel card. In the meantime, the Saudis have made their own moves. They refused to abandon Russia. They refused to increase oil output. And they went ahead and signed a peace deal with Iran. What's worse, it was brokered by China. So the US has a lot of ground to cover. They're eager to mend ties with Saudi Arabia, and normalization with Israel will help. But the biggest challenge right now is Israel itself. It's seen 7 months of protest and counting, and a looming civil war. They need to normalize this situation first before they can normalize ties with Riyadh. And now look at what's going on in Israel's parliament. No, we won't focus on the judicial overhaul today. Instead, there's another problematic bill which has passed. It's been called a sexual terrorism law. This new bill says crimes like sexual harassment or rape should consider the motivation of the attacker. If the attacker is driven by terrorist, nationalist, or racist motivations, the crime will attract close to the maximum sentence. The maximum sentence itself will be doubled in some of these cases, and so will the compensation awarded to the victims. Now, on the face of it, it looks like Israel is cracking down on sexual violence, but critics say this law is not going to target every offender equally. It has specifically been made to go after Palestinians. Here's a report.
Israel's parliament, the Knesset, just passed a bill to get tougher on sexual violence. It was a bipartisan effort. The ruling right-wing coalition and even opposition parties came together to pass this. It's being called a sexual terrorism law, and some of its provisions are contentious. The law doubles compensation fines for sexual harassment. Penalties for sexual assault convictions can be doubled from the current maximum sentencing limit. Government officials must report the number of sexual terrorism cases to Parliament, and the police have to follow up on investigations. If this was all, then Israel would have been commended on taking a hard stance against sexual violence. But that isn't the case, because these tough new measures come with a disclaimer. They are only applicable in cases where the offender had terrorist, nationalist, or racist motivations. Look at the words again: terrorist, nationalist, or racist. In Israel, who do you think can be considered a terrorist, or a nationalist, or racist? Do you think these terms commonly apply to Jewish people, or are they exclusively used to describe Palestinians? That's the criticism of these new laws. They only target crimes by certain groups. They cannot be applied to everyone in Israel. Even when the law was being proposed, there was no effort to hide this. The parliamentarian who introduced it said it would provide for the proper and correct treatment to female Jewish victims. That statement is incorrect. Because the new law does not protect Jewish women better from crimes by Jewish men, since Jewish men cannot be proved to have a terrorist, nationalist, or racist motivation while committing an offense. So how is that proper and correct treatment to female Jewish victims? Because the law does not treat the abusers equally, it just punishes Palestinian perpetrators more. But why? Aren't all cases of sexual assault and harassment heinous? Don't all perpetrators deserve the harshest punishments? Then why does this new Israeli law let Jewish Israelis get away with lighter punishment? Because their intention wasn't racist? You cannot have crimes being committed or ranked on the basis of who commits them. The Association of Rape Crisis Centers in Israel has come out against this law. It's a body that provides support for sexual assault victims. It says it has no data of rape being used as a form of terror. And it says the new law is dangerous for creating a form of rating system for sexual assaults. Sexual assault is sexual assault, irrespective of the perpetrator's race or intention. Aida Tuma Sliman is a member of Israel's parliament who voted against the law. She summed it up in a simple tweet. Do not punish according to hierarchies and classifications. Rape is rape and harassment is harassment. Don't promote racism on the backs of victims. A law that only applies to certain people in a country is a racist law. Critics have accused Israel of institutionalizing racism in the past. Israel has also been called an apartheid state by South Africa, a country who'd know a thing or two about it. Israel vehemently denies the charge. But laws like this new sexual terrorism bill certainly do not help its case.
Coco Chanel once famously said, "Fashion is not something that exists in dresses only. Fashion is in the sky, in the street." This quote is from 1969. 5 decades have passed since, and now fashion has made its way to medical prescriptions. To explain what I'm talking about, let's go back to the Met Gala last year. It saw a range of skinny, high-fashion celebrities like Kim Kardashian. She wore the iconic Marilyn Monroe dress and lost 7 kilos in 3 weeks to fit into this dress, which is horrifying. But for those desperate to lose weight, it screamed goals. Within a week, Google searches for Ozempic spiked to an all-time high. Of course, correlation does not equal causation. Though experts cannot help but connect the dots, Ozempic has quickly become famous as a celebrity skinny jab. It's a TikTok trend. #Ozempic has more than 160 million views on the platform. Terrifyingly, there's even an Ozempic TikTok challenge, and now the drug is flying off the racks. Ozempic is a type 2 diabetes treatment. It is prescription medication, which patients self-inject once a week. This drug was first released to public in 2018. Back then, 92% of its users were diabetic. In 2021, this share fell to 77%. Do you know why? Because now the drug is increasingly being used for another purpose, and that is weight loss. This is a famous side effect of the drug. People are aware of this. They want to lose weight, so they're injecting themselves with diabetes drugs. And pharmacies are more than happy to oblige, especially online pharmacies. They're giving Ozempic and other similar drugs off-label, meaning prescribing medicines for a different condition than their original purpose. It sounds shady, but it's completely legal and fairly common. In Ozempic's case, what is the result? Diabetic people are not getting their medicines. There is a shortage of Ozempic in the UK, for example. People living with diabetes are scrambling to get their hands on the drug. They're ringing up pharmacies, some even begging them, because many are going months without their dosage. This has serious clinical implications for diabetic patients. They need this drug, Ozempic. Meanwhile, who are getting the drug? Who are the people who are getting the drug? people who merely want it for cosmetic purposes. Sure, Ozempic and other weight loss drugs are necessary in some cases, like when weight gain and obesity poses threat to life. But that's not why these drugs are flying off the racks. People of a healthy weight are getting prescriptions for Ozempic because they want to slim down, and this is completely unacceptable. But it's not even the worst part. People are left with problematic side effects like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, stomach paralysis, depression, even suicidal thoughts. You will find a list of all these side effects published in fine print on the drug packaging. What does Ozempic have to say about this? Its parent company, Novo Nordisk, says these side effects are all well known. They're mild to moderate in severity and last for a short duration. Now, factually, all of this is correct. But here's what experts say. One of the side effects, stomach paralysis, for instance, has no cure. The tension in the stomach may not last for long, but its complications will. It causes dehydration, malnutrition, even vomiting. And this may be a mildly severe side effect for the company, but for those with a decrease in their life quality, it neither seems mild nor short-term. In some cases, the government has stepped in. Health departments are discouraging off-label prescription of this drug. They're urging doctors to halt prescribing it to new diabetic patients. But that may not be enough. Such demands do not solve the problem. Who is regulating the drug is the question. Who is making sure that these drugs are sold under strict conditions? Where are the health checks? Who is screening for eating disorders to check validity? A lot of questions, but no answer. And in some cases, governments have approved these drugs. So they've shoved accountability on patients, then wiped their hands off the matter. Now, regulation is absent, while drug-fueled TikTok challenges are taking place. This is where we are at. And now, staying on the topic of health and medicine, I want to ask you a question. What would you do if you could control what goes on in your body? If you could program it, so to speak? Would you set an alarm that forces your eyes to open in time for work or class? Or would you program your muscles to keep flexing even while you slept, to burn those extra calories while you're dreaming? Or would you be even more ambitious? Would you try and fix underlying medical issues by manually controlling your body? I ask all of this because this is where humans seem to be headed. A new research paper has been published by scientists in Switzerland. They say they can send electric commands directly to human DNA, meaning they can make human genes obey external commands. They claim to have a proof of concept for this electrogenetic interface, and they say this is the future of wearable medical devices. Here's a report.
An electrogenetic interface. That's what scientists at the ETH Zurich University are calling their new discovery. They have found a way to talk to human DNA, to give human genes commands using electricity. Thus the name electrogenetic. The scientists from Switzerland just published a paper detailing their findings. They are quite excited about the potential their research has in the field of wearable electronic devices. Let's first talk about what they did, how the scientists proved their concept. They took a mouse with type 1 diabetes and attached some human cells to it. The human cells were capable of producing insulin. That's the essential hormone that controls your blood sugar levels. People develop diabetes when their bodies are unable to regulate their blood sugar levels on their own. Coming back to the experiment with the mouse, the scientists had put acupuncture needles into the test subject, right where the human genes had been attached. This allowed the scientists to transmit commands to the human DNA via electricity, almost like a small electric shock to tell the human genes to start making insulin, and it apparently worked. The scientists say their electrogenetic interface allowed them to supply insulin to the mouse in a timely manner, that too by using a standard set of AA batteries. Now imagine what this could do for diabetic humans. We could wear a watch-like device that could trigger regular insulin production. A machine could take over for our failing DNA and keep our blood sugar levels in check, that too on a timer. No more alarms to remind you of your insulin dose. If you combine this technology with constant monitoring, it could help prevent insulin shocks. It could potentially save lives. And that's just the beginning. The technology doesn't need to just focus on diabetic patients. It has the potential to alter medicine as we know it. Imagine telling the genes that are causing cancer to just stop. Imagine pressing a button and suppressing a rare genetic condition. May sound like science fiction now, but this research could pave the way towards that future. The ETH Zurich University team behind this research have been looking into electrogenetics for a while now. In 2020, they successfully used electricity to control gene expression. And 3 years later, they've come out with the electrogenetic interface, a way to command human DNA directly. We found out that electricity could control DNA a while ago, but the next stage was figuring out how. It's not like you could point a remote at a person and have their genes respond to a button. This new research shows us a way, using acupuncture needles to transfer the electricity in this case. Of course, the technology is nowhere near ready yet. It's only been tried on a mouse. It will take a while before an electrogenetic interface can be hooked up to humans. But it still moves us closer to wearable medical devices, ones that can directly apply gene-based therapies. They have a great potential to save lives and drastically influence our living.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story, starting with the Philippines. A bride walked down a flooded aisle. Quite literally, the trail of her white wedding gown got completely soaked in water. This is because Typhoon Doksuri has triggered floods in the Philippines. But it did not deter this couple from getting married. In the United States, an audience member splashed her drink at rapper Cardi B. But she wasn't having any of it. The rapper did not hold back and gave it back to her. And a rare white tiger cub was rescued from a private owner in the Czech Republic. It has found a new home in Germany. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1914, Germany declared war on Russia. Germany was part of the Central Powers, while Russia was part of the Allied Powers. After the invasion of Serbia, in fact, Russia began to mobilize its army on the border of Austria and Hungary. Germany asked Russia to demobilize. When there was no response from the other end, Germany declared a full-blown war. We're leaving you with that. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.